Welcome to episode 35 of the Growing Space podcast. You guys, today I have such a treat in store for you. We are going to be hearing from one of my friends. His name is Justin Orders, and he is a professional beekeeper. Oh yeah, you heard me right. He professionally keeps bees at his home and at other people's homes all across the Charlotte area. So if you're brand new to listening to this podcast, hello, I am so glad that you're here. I am based in Charlotte, North Carolina, as is our guest for today's show. And fun fact / slight spoiler for this episode, Justin and I are actually neighbors. Yeah. I know. As fate would have it, there is a beekeeper who lives almost directly across the street from me, and our business models are pretty similar too, except obviously he works with bees and I work with plants that you can eat. But we both work with individuals who are interested in either keeping bees or growing food at home, and really help to just be a cheerleader, a resource, and a guide throughout the entire process, even offering to do some things, some maintenance for our clients. So I don't want to take up too much time in the intro today because we have such a buzzing conversation to pass along to all of you who may be considering keeping bees for yourself, or you just want to learn more about bees. You picked a great episode to tune into. So without further ado, let's go ahead and sit down for a chat with my neighbor, Justin Orders from Queen's Orders Honey. Welcome to the Growing Space podcast. I'm your host, Farmer Erin, owner of The Patio Farmer, and I believe that no matter what size space you have, you can grow food at home. Tune in every Tuesday as I share my best tips, tricks, and encouragement for tending to homegrown edible plants. I'm here to support your food growing journey. The Growing Space podcast is sponsored by Plant Club by The Patio Farmer. Plant Club by The Patio Farmer is a monthly subscription service I started in 2020. It's a membership-based opportunity to take your growing journey to the next level. With 4 different membership options, you get to decide the amount and kind of support that's right for you. All Plant Club members receive access to my online community through a platform called Circle. Having access to this platform allows members to share pictures, ask questions, celebrate harvest, and get to know each other. All Plant Club members also have access to free seeds each month, along with information on how to plant and tend to their crops, with seeding instructions and downloadable resources from the Patio Farmers Resource Library. Membership starts at just $14 a month. Join Plant Club today by visiting my website, thepatiofarmer.com/membership. All right, Justin. Well, I am so glad to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for agreeing to an interview. I would just love for you to start off by introducing yourself and your business, Queen's Orders Honey, and all the things that you do.
Hey, Aaron. Glad to be here. My name is Justin Orders. I'm with Queen's Orders Honey, where I provide bee services, honeybee services to Charlotte and the greater Charlotte area. Been doing it for a couple of years and love everything about bees. And yeah, really glad to be on this podcast again. Thanks for having me.
Tell us, how did you get into beekeeping? What's been the journey for you?
Yeah, so I've always loved bugs. Like from the very early stage, like I was the weird kid that would, everyone would be playing basketball, I'd be like looking under rocks and figuring out what roly-polies did, and just they've always fascinated me. For a while I wanted to go to school for that. I was at UNCC, and that just didn't really work out for me. I ended up leaving school and not really knowing what I wanted to do. I began to volunteer at places around Charlotte. One of them was the Discovery Place Nature in Freedom Park. I loved going there as a kid. It was like my favorite birthday destination for the butterfly exhibit and the, just all overall focus on nature. And when I was volunteering there, they had honeybee hives. One day we went out there. They only had maybe like 4 at the time. They may have more now. We went out there and just got a glimpse of it, just very brief. I think we just were like feeding them, which if you know beekeeping, that's not a whole lot to do. But it just even that was just like the catalyst that just like said, okay, I need to do this. I don't know what I want to do with this, but I just know I need to do something with this. And so a couple of weeks later, I bought a hive from a very, very well-known beekeeper in the Charlotte area. And he helped me a lot that first year. Next year, I went to bee school, and yeah, it's just grown and grown and grown since there. I've been dealt a very fortunate hand with having the area to keep bees in my property and as well as the resources in Charlotte, but all coupled with my love for bees, it's worked out really well.
You know, I also went through bee school, and that was just such a, like, I still think about that experience. And it was just so exciting to be in a room full of people who were all coming together over the shared love of bees and like just all the passion that you see among a group of beekeepers. What is your favorite thing about being a beekeeper?
Honestly, just being able to look at bees all day. Like the most exciting part of my day. Like, and I do a lot of fun things in the day. It's not all just like, toil and emails and stuff. So I do get to do a lot of really interesting things. But the thing I'm most excited to do is go outside and open up my hives. I want to see what they're doing. It's 33 degrees outside right now, but I want to go in there. I know I can't, but I'm just like, I want to see what they're doing. I just want to experience their world in the way that I can being a beekeeper. So yeah, and just being able to talk about insects all day. I love talking. I talk to people like you and other people like all day about bees, and I really, really never get tired of it. So yeah, it's all great.
I'm going to go a little off script here. And outside of honeybees and bees in general, like, what is your favorite bug? Do you have one?
Oh man.
I know.
Insect, that's a tough one. I really like moths, and I think they just don't get a whole lot of appreciation. They're so beautiful. We don't often see them a lot. I like the really big ones, like the Io moth, probably, I forget the actual name for it, but yeah, just the ones you normally see, like they have beautiful markings. Even the caterpillar, the larval state of it is also really interesting. They're so large. So I feel like I can never get a proper answer to that question, but that's the best I could do for now. Yeah, moths are awesome. And they're pollinators. People don't know that. People like they don't want moths or whatever for whatever reason. I don't know, but they're great pollinators. They're the ones doing pollination just at night. So yeah, keep them around. They're great.
I know, probably asking you what your favorite insect or bug is like asking me to pick my favorite plant. It's like,
Right.
I don't know. Oh, so are honeybees native to North America?
Yeah, they are not. Their genus species name is Apis mellifera, which is translated to European honeybee. So they are actually from Europe. They originated from Europe. They came over with the settlers in the, I want to say 16th, 17th century, somewhere around there, because, they were using them for honey purposes, for beeswax purposes. The natives even called them the white man's fly, appropriately named. Yeah, they were not something that I guess was really readily accepted. Well, I guess the natives didn't accept a lot of things the settlers were doing, but that was also one of them. But anyway, while they are not native, because I'm very focused on native species and bringing things back to how they were pre-industrial era. Honeybees get a pass because they've assimilated with the native species. They're not, let's say, they're not invasive. They're not something that is like taking over, like we're looking at, emerald ash borers or spotted lanternflies or anything like that. Even though they have come from a different place, they're non-natives, they're also non-invasive. They've adapted and again assimilated with our species to where they're not wreaking havoc or anything. They're actually doing a lot of benefit. And honestly, without them in the United States at this moment, we would not have a very productive agricultural system. So yeah, very much needed.
And so there are a lot of native bees though, right? In North America, in our communities as well. Like not all bees are honeybees. What are some fun like native bee facts or honeybee facts?
Yeah, I would like to show some love to the native bees because they're also just like we all talk about Save the Bees as this initiative to, you know, it seems for years it was focused on honeybees. And though they do need help, they don't need as much help as, for instance, like sweat bees, mining bees, just these solitary bees that usually have, one mother and then she reproduces in the spring like most bees do, and they have to last out and then reproduce in the maybe in the fall again and last through the winter. And being that they're so small, they don't have a giant hive and use social behavior with other bees. They don't have as much going for them. They're just very selective. They will find certain fruits, certain nuts to make their home into, and they usually just live off those things. Compared to honeybees, who are generalists, they'll eat pretty much anything. I like that they've adapted to this one certain thing, this one tree, this one shrub, this one area of ground, and that has become like everything to them. And I think that's a great fact because it's interesting to me, but it's also emphasizes how we as, protectors of them need to be conscientious of that because if we get rid of that one thing, there goes them. That they cannot live off something else. That is their home, their food source, their water source, whatever it may be. So being selective while also interesting is their Achilles heel, and we need to be mindful of what that is for them so we're not taking it away from them.
So I recently bought the book, The Bees in Your Backyard, which is all about the native bees. So I've been learning a lot about them. And something that I learned was that some bees are, like you said, like they're solitary bees, which is different than honeybees because honeybees, they are part of a colony and they have a whole community of different members and structures. And could you just kind of, for those of us who haven't seen inside a hive, could you just walk us through the different parts of the hive, like what is going on inside of those white boxes? And let's just say, like, if the honeybees weren't in that kind of controlled environment, where would they be, like, in the wild?
Yeah. So what the box is meant to replicate is this, this idyllic, I always say like the Winnie the Pooh situation where you have a cavity in a tree and the bees have made a home in it. It's sheltered from rain and wind. It has plenty of space for them to develop and grow. So that's what we're replicating with the box. It's above ground, unlike those, usually ground dwelling native solitary bees. But yeah, inside of it is instead of, when you looked at it, a native or a feral colony, it's pieces of comb kind of a couple, not even an inch, but really like centimeters apart from one another, kind of in a row, almost like a U shape. That's what we're seeing in these tree cavities in these feral colonies. And we're replicating that in these what we call laying straw hives, these boxes, by taking wooden frames and putting something in the center of these frames for the bees to then build wax upon. So it's again trying to make it as natural as possible, and they gravitate that like excellent. Like it's they don't, for instance, they're not building comb on the walls of the hive. You give them the frames, they say this is where we're going to build the comb, and they do it very well. The combs usually don't attach together so long as there's enough bee space, rather the space that the bees need in order to crawl in between the frames. It's not too large, it's not too small. But yeah, the bees are using this comb to store honey, obviously. Pollen, that's their protein food source. They're using it as a nursery to develop baby bees throughout the year. The queen's in there. There's only one queen per colony most of the time. There are some exceptions to that rule, but I'm not going to get into that that would take a very, very long time. But yeah, it's just a giant colony of bees. Maybe peak season, it can be something like 10,000, 20,000 bees. Whereas right now in, the colder months, it's looking more like 1,000, maybe 2,000. And that's really all I need to get through the winter. So yeah, again, just like whatever they're doing in nature, same thing in this box, just as a little bit more control for the beekeeper.
Mm. So you mentioned bee space. What is that measurement? How much space do they need?
Uh, 3/8 of an inch, I want to say, or 5/8. It's somewhere around there. I know it's a very exact measurement. And yeah, it's if you don't abide by that, if you give them too large of a space, for instance, if I have all these frames in a box, and which has happened to me before, for what, like I'll just take out one frame and forget about it. And these bees will then fill that space because the frame is about an inch and a half wide. If that is left vacant, that space, they will build comb in that space. And then that's a big sticky mess that I've got to then pull apart. I don't want that. I don't want that for the bees. The bees don't want that. So honestly, it's kind of like, if you build it, they will build within it. If it's any sort of cavity, they're going to say, okay, there's like the architect bees are like, this is how it's going to look. This is how this is going to be shaped, regardless of, what you put in it. But by putting again those frames in there, that gives them like the blueprint for how this should look. And yeah, again, without it, it would be really, really messy.
So give us a little introduction to the different members of the colony. So you mentioned there's only one queen out of all of those thousands of bees. There's one queen. And so what's her role? And then there's drones and workers, but the workers can have multiple different roles. So just kind of like give us an overview of what everybody does in the hive.
Sure. Yeah, the queen, though given that title, really isn't like the dominant, like it's not like while it is a matriarchy and that females are the ones in charge of the hive, it's not her who is in charge. She is I mean, she's literally just like a walking uterus. Really, or flying rather. She's able to lay these eggs, and she does that to the will of the worker bees who are really in charge. For instance, in the springtime, they will chase her around the hive, make her go a little bit faster so that she's losing weight, so that when she needs to swarm, because that's usually when they swarm is in the springtime, she's more agile to fly and swarm around. Again, given the name of the queen, I think it's more or less of like she's very important. There's only one of her, but she's not the one in charge. They do mind her and they want to make sure she's doing everything she can, but it's almost like mafia. Like they're like, okay, keep doing this stuff, keep doing the thing we want you to. We'll keep you around so long as we need you. But again, if she's in decline, they kill her. They say you've done your job, or we're gonna kill you and then replace you with another younger queen. So again, they're really the girls in charge, and on that matter, the worker bees. They're the ones that really get all the attention because they do all the work. As the name implies, they get the honey, they get the pollen, they take care of the baby bees, foster them, they guard the hive. They're, again, worker implies that they are working nonstop. They don't live very long, 6 to 7 weeks, whereas compared with a queen that can live up to 5 years, it's a pretty short lifespan. Because they're basically working themselves to death. They're the ones that you're going to see at the picnic. They're the ones that may sting you. They're the ones that are really making this whole honeybee world go round. That's not to say the other ones don't have an important role, but again, like without them, a lot of work would not get done. And on that note, the drones or male bees in the hive are, while the queen is a walking, flying uterus, they are a walking, flying male genitals. That's really their job. Is they don't have stingers. In place of the stinger is, well, so they don't really use that, but for when it's mating season, which is most of the year for them, it starts in March and ends around October when it starts to get cold. And their job is to find queens to mate with, and then die shortly after. They do not really have any other responsibility, though that is a huge role because we want good bee genetics. We want them to, spread good genes wherever that may go. We want strong, healthy drones. But for instance, drones, they go up in these areas where they're mating with queens. And then if they get tired or hungry, they'll go to not their hive, but they'll go to other hives to go get a snack. So they'll even take a rest. They'll take a snooze by going to like neighboring hives because they've flown so far from their hive to go to these areas to meet with queens. And if they're tired of flying, they'll take a little pit stop, go back up, and try again. That's really all they're after. So yeah, drones, male bees, worker bees, of course not in order of importance here. Worker bees, the females, and then queen bee, the big female. And she's notably larger than the worker bees. Still, one of the hardest things as a beekeeper is differentiating and seeing, trying to find the queen versus the worker bees.
Anytime you're inspecting hives, you're always conscientious of the fact that there is only one queen. And
Right.
whenever I find her, I'm like, oh my gosh, there she is. Okay, I wasn't here. I'm just gonna close up this box and I'll come back another time because I always get really nervous when I see her. Now, worker bees are excellent craftswomen. They make all sorts of things. Honey is the most notable thing that the worker bees make, of course. What else are they making? I mean, theoretically, they have to make all of the things that are in the hive.
They are responsible for the beeswax, essentially the infrastructure of the hive. In the springtime, when they have a nectar flow, when there's a source of nectar to forage from, they actually secrete wax from their abdomen glands. And from that, they're able to craft comb, bee comb. From that, they're able to store honey, again, store pollen, store baby bees, which they're also in charge of raising the baby bees. They produce another substance known as royal jelly, which they feed to the baby bees. They also feed a surplus of that to new queens that they're developing. As the name implies, it kind of gives this developing larva pupa these really interesting properties that allows her to lay eggs for 3 to 5 years, sometimes 2,000 eggs per day. So it's almost like superpower juice for the bee. They don't make it, but they derive this really sticky substance from plants known as propolis. It's plant resin and it is edible. Some people eat it for antibacterial microbial purposes because that's what the bees use for. It's like antibacterial, antifungal caulk, like what they use to seal up the hive in spaces that, there's an opening. I've seen, sometimes my openings are too open. I'll go into the hive and I'll see this almost wall of this propolis at the opening so that they're sealing each other. Like there's too much air coming in here, so we're going to try to seal it shut. Maybe there's too many pests trying to come in there, and they'll use that as a way to seal it up. So I think that's one that oftentimes goes unnoticed. And again, they don't make it, they just derive it like they do. They derive nectar and pollen from plants, but it's a really, really interesting and an important part of their survival and overall health.
Can you just give us an idea of what it's like to harvest honey from a hive? Like how does that usually go? What are the steps?
It's very sticky. I'll just say that much. It's like it is the stickiest part of being a beekeeper. It's messy. The past 2 years I've done it here at our house, and I will not do that anymore because it is, again, like everything gets sticky. Your hands get sticky. You touch the doorknob, you come back in, you touch something else. It's a big old mess. And I'm not necessarily like saying don't do it. I don't like harvesting honey. I'm just saying it's sticky. It's very sticky business. I have to take these frames that we talked about earlier. There's certain frames in the hive that they selectively fill with honey. They'll then cap those frames with wax. Again, they're secreting wax throughout this time, so they'll then seal it shut, and that's basically putting like the stamp on it, say this is good. It essentially, this honey will preserve forever, indefinitely. It will not expire. And now we're going to put this seal on it with this wax that says it's going to stay around in the hive forever. So pests can't get in. Other bees are a little bit harder for them to steal it. So what I would do is I have to uncap that frame with usually a hot knife to slice through the wax. I then put the frames, usually 6 or 8 at a time, into a massive centrifuge, which will spin the honey out. Takes about a minute, minute and a half to fully spin out. All that honey falls to the sides of the centrifuge, then falls to the bottom. At the bottom of the centrifuge is a tap that I open up, pour into a filter and bucket. Out comes the bad stuff, well, not necessarily bad stuff, but the stuff you don't want to see in your honey, the wax. Sometimes there's a bee that just got lost in there. I don't want that in there either. Other insects, they'll make their way there too. So I'm filtering all that stuff out. And all that's to say, yes, bees and insects do get into the honey, but it, like propolis, has antibacterial properties. For instance, if you have a cut on your arm, you can put honey in there and it works kind of like Neosporin. And that not only does it keep out pathogens and bacteria, but it also heals the skin a lot quicker. So yeah, my honey is raw, and by eating it, I also know that while there's been bees in there, it's also perfectly fine to consume. And in fact, it will never, like I said, expire. They found some honey in some Egyptian tomb like 4,000 years ago, and they popped it in a jar and put it in, I think, like in the microwave or something to decrystallize it, and then perfectly edible again. So yeah, it's a really magnificent substance.
In addition to being a beekeeper yourself, you also teach other people how to be beekeepers, and you actually help people in their homes with tending to hives and having their own bees, which is so cool. And I think is, one of the reasons why we have a lot of synergy between our businesses. We have similar business models. I work with edible plants and you work with bees, which is just so cool. So tell us, if you had a piece of advice or words of wisdom to share with someone who is wanting to become a beekeeper themselves in their backyards, what would you share with them?
Get informed, see what's in your community. Luckily, Charlotte is a great place to keep bees, being that we have a very strong beekeeping community. North Carolina as a whole is a great state to keep bees. So see what's around you, see if there's a bee club that you can get involved in, ask around there, see who can help you get started. I also provide a new beekeeper training program as well as my service to where I keep bees for other people. So for those people that are just like, I don't even want to, take any second guesses here. I want someone who's an expert to help me out. I provide that as well. And yeah, just if that's not working for you, if you live in a very remote area, you can find a lot online. There's a lot of people I subscribe to that have been giving out excellent bee information for years and years and years. It's not a very simple thing to Google. If you have a question about beekeeping, you're going to find literally a million answers to one simple question. So finding a reliable source that you trust, that you respect, and just sticking with that is probably going to help you more than, asking a bunch of people and getting very different answers.
I feel like that goes along with plants as well. People say that they had a question and they looked it up online, and you find all of these different answers and approaches and thoughts and philosophies for how to manage your pest or disease or whatever they're looking for the answer to. Now, usually when people ask me about plants and looking things up online, I recommend that they look for resources that are closer to them geographically. Does that apply for bees? Does it matter, if we're in North Carolina and there's a beekeeper in Oregon and she's sharing information, would that be an appropriate filter to put on as you're searching online as local resources?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the guys I follow the most, Cayman Reynolds, he's out in Tennessee. Not only is he is an excellent resource for beekeeping, but he's definitely I think we're in the same zone. If not, it's like a letter off, like zone A, zone B, whatever. So he's throughout the year, he's dealing with the same thing I'm dealing with. Whereas I follow this other person who is an excellent content creator, love her videos, Rushing Rivers Apiaries on Instagram, if you're interested. She's in British Columbia. And yeah, I right now her bees are sealed up tight because it's just so cold there. And a lot of the things that she deals with where, the nectar flow what to do in the winter, what even to do in the spring is very different than it is here. So while I do still like her content, it's not as helpful in some times of the year.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. So what about books? Do you have like a favorite beekeeping reference book that you like to mention or?
I wish I read more. I started with Beekeeping for Dummies, and I got a lot
Mm.
out of that, but there's also like not a lot of great stuff in there, like most for dummies books. So I recently just got a really cool book called The Beekeeping Bible, which is just like it talks a lot about it's great pictures, talks a lot about just like the ins and outs. Like you can probably get a lot of the same information from the Beekeeping Bible as you would in Beekeeping for Dummies or any like introductory beekeeping book, but it's also got really cool recipes like how to make honey bread, how to make mead, I think is in there too, other desserts. If you're really nerdy and want some more scientific stuff, resources, Honeybee Democracy by Thomas Seeley is a absolute classic. It is, I've not read all the way through because it's very, very dense. I've even tried listening to it on audiobook, and that too is like a lot. If you're not fascinated by anything that I've shared about bees, I really would recommend that you check this out because it's just the whole life cycle and how the bees interact with one another is all documented very well in this book, and you will find the reason why bees are so cool in that book for sure.
Cool. I'll have to add that to my book list. What if somebody doesn't like they don't necessarily want to keep bees in their backyards, but they do love bees and they want to support honeybees? What are some different ways that people can keep pollinators happy and close by without becoming a beekeeper?
There's a lot of resources for that. I would recommend like going on to wherever you're at, like going looking up Xerces Society and finding native plants in your area. Plant for pollinators. I think they have a pollinator specific list there, and that's how I started. I now work with someone that is an expert at this stuff planting natives, but and through him I found a lot of really interesting plants to plant around my house for pollinators, not just bees. You know, pollinators, as I mentioned earlier, stem to so many different insects. But yeah, just finding specifically natives or not if non-native, non-invasive, of course, and just planting them around your house. If you're very new to this, finding something that's not very selective, that doesn't need a whole lot of this or that, um, and just seeing what the bees gravitate to, or rather the pollinators gravitate to. And I think that's a lot of the fun in this too, is exploring the plants that really work for my bees, that make pretty flowers, that make a lot of pollen, that make a lot of nectar, that smell really nice, and exploring that with my bees or with other pollinators. So yeah, definitely just giving them a food source. You don't have to go out and buy a hive tomorrow. You're still helping them tremendously, especially if you live in an area that doesn't have a whole lot of those native plants or really just plants for bees to forage on.
In an earlier episode this year, I was talking about different plant families, and I did an episode on the composite plant families, which are tons of flowering plants, like dandelions are part of that plant family, and artichokes and lettuce. And I was mentioning that in the backyard, which I think you've seen them, the cardoons that I have planted as like edible landscaping.
Oh,
And
yeah.
when they bloom, it is the cutest thing. The bees love them, and they're just like head down in this bright purple flower on the top of this like thistle looking plant. I am just so enamored by them, and I can see them from like our bedroom window, and it's just such a like great thing to wake up to. I can just see the little bees out there on the cardoons.
Yeah.
It's really fun. We're getting ready to wrap up our interview, and I have two questions that I love to ask all of my podcast guests. The first one is a compound question, but it is, what is your favorite vegetable and why?
Hands down, zucchini. I hated zucchini as a kid. I don't know why, because I absolutely love it now. And I think one of the reasons why is, well, it's there's so many functions, there's so many things you can do with it. but it's also one of the hardest things to grow. Like any sort of squash around here just gets eaten by, if not squash bugs, those borers, those nasty,
Mm,
whatever those were. I never get to see
vine
one. I
borers.
just see their vine borers. Yeah, I never see one, but I always see the remnants, and it's just like I maybe have zucchini for I get like I don't know. I'm lucky if I get a dozen out of a couple plants, and then they're just gone by all these pests because they love them too. And I think again, like I get so many tomatoes that I gotta get sick of tomatoes. If I got so many zucchini, I probably get sick of them. But the fact that they're kind of just like when I get one and it's not eaten up by something, I'm just like, I'm gonna make you into so many things. I'm gonna make this worth it. So zucchini for sure.
And then what is the most important thing that you have learned as a beekeeper?
I would say honestly, it's not just about honeybees. It's not all insects, all bees, you know, need help, and we all have a way to help them. If it's planting native plants or native flowers that help them out, or non-natives, again, just giving them something and acknowledging that, we've grown up with this false narrative that they are out to kill us, that they want to hurt us, that they're dangerous, that, even wasp and yellow jackets. Like I've spent a lot of time with them as well as a beekeeper, and I've learned that while they can be a little bit more aggressive and their stings do hurt more, they're not trying to kill me. They're not trying to hurt me. They're just really just annoyed by me. They don't like me to be around their hives or to disturb them, and they're going to show their teeth when I endanger them, just as much as if I were to come into your home tonight and disturb you, like you'd probably be pretty upset. It's the same for them. They're reacting in a very natural and understandable way to us, and to not fear them. If you don't love them, that's fine, but just respect them. Don't, just immediately go out and get a can of Raid and try and kill them off. If I can leave anyone listening with that, it's, that these bees, not only do they need your help, but they also need us. If in order for us to help them, we need to not fear them. And whatever way that looks like for you, it can be large, it can be small, you're doing something.
Before we close out, I just want to make sure that everyone has your information and the best way to reach out to you. So, how can people find out more about your services and all the different things that you do?
Sure. Beans Orders Honey. You can find me on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, somewhat reluctantly TikTok as well. If you want more information, you can subscribe to my website. If you want to take a hive tour, experience some bees at my apiary, you can sign up for that as well on my website. So, or if you just have a question about bees, email me, you can call me. I'm very happy to talk about bees in whatever shape or form. So yeah, find me there or come out to the apiary sometime and check out bees for yourself.
Well, thank you, Justin. I really appreciate your time and appreciate you being on the podcast and sharing your knowledge with us. It's really wonderful to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me and a happy World Bee Day.
Yes, happy World Bee Day. So exciting. This episode is airing on May 21st. And so I just wanted to wish you all a happy belated World Bee Day. Yes, World Bee Day. It was actually yesterday, May 20th. And so, when Justin and I were thinking about when would be the perfect time to share this episode, naturally, right around World Bee Day made the most sense. I hope you have a moment today or this week or sometime very soon to just stare at a bee and appreciate its role. And it doesn't have to be a honeybee. It could be a bumblebee or a carpenter bee or, I don't know, a native bee that maybe you find in your backyard. Whatever kind of bee it is, I hope that you just take a moment or two next time you see one to give it a smile, give it a wink, give it a little elbow nudge, and tell it that it is doing a great job and that you are so thankful for it. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation that Justin and I had a few weeks ago before the full season got into swing for both of us. As you might imagine, bee season and plant season are the exact same time of year. I was super thankful that Justin and I had time to connect a little earlier this year. I hope you learned something new about bees and it gave you a greater appreciation for these delightful little insects. In next week's episode, I am going to share, I thought this would be fun, maybe a little bit of a no-brainer, but I am going to share a few reasons why you should grow food at home. Gonna kind of keep it short and sweet, or at least that's my plan. You never know. Once I get to jibber jabbering, I sometimes end up with a longer episode than I originally think. But next week, I'm going to share just a handful of reasons why you should grow food at home. Now, one of them, obviously, is to eat the food that you grow, but there are so many other benefits and perks, side effects to growing food, and it really permeates beyond just the practice of growing plants and growing food. And if you have listened to this podcast in the past, then you will know that at the end of every episode, I like to share a fun little fact, fun little tidbit, morsel of information. And this week, I feel kind of bad given that we're 3 weeks into the month, but I did just want to celebrate and honor the fact that it is No Mow May. And I would love to know if you are participating in No Mow May. This is kind of like No Shave November, right? For all of you dudes. Basically, it's an invitation in the month of May to not mow your yard. Oh boy. I know. A little bit of a contentious subject, but I don't believe we have mowed our yard yet this month. Or if we did, it was at the very beginning of the month. My yard is full of wildflowers, you guys. Like, my yard has a season. It's always in bloom. Something is always flowering, and it's gorgeous, and I'm obsessed, and I love it. We have some grass in our yard, but for the most part, it is wildflowers, and all of our pollinators who are in the neighborhood, Justin's bees, no doubt, come to visit our yard to suck up lots of yummy nectar and pollen. And because of that, I like to encourage Marshall, my partner, Marshall, to not mow the yard. He does a lot of the mowing because he enjoys it. And I try to encourage him to allow everything to flower first for at least a few days for the little bees before he mows. I hope maybe for the rest of the month, it's only 10 days, y'all. It's only 10 days if you're listening to this on the 21st. Maybe skip mowing your yard for the pollinators, for the bees. Make it your celebration of No Mow May and World Bee Day. I don't know. It's just a thought. And I'm also going to give a shout out to my friend Valerie, who inspired this fun little tidbit of information to share with you all, because she recently purchased wildflower seeds for her customers and clients as a celebration of No Mow May. So thanks, Valerie. Valerie is the owner of a small business called Ecological. It's EKOLOGICALL, 2 L's. And another fun fact or tidbit of information for you is that Justin, myself, and Valerie were all nominated as potential awardees of the Sustain Charlotte Inspiring Small Business of the Year. I will put links to Justin's information for you and any resources that he mentioned in today's show notes. I will also put links to No Mow May and World Bee Day and Ecological and Sustain Charlotte and their awards and all of that fun stuff, just in case you're interested. Spoiler, none of the three of us won, but one of my dear friends, Rachel, and her business, Mindful and Good, did, and I am so thrilled for her. Okay, well, that is it for this week, and I hope to see you back next week for all the reasons why you should grow food at home. All right, y'all. Thanks again for tuning into this week's episode of the Growing Space Podcast. I hope that you learned something new and that you were able to take this new information home with you and implement into your growing journey and into your growing space. As always, I am here to support you and your food growing journey. If you'd like to learn more about the different services and resources and membership programs that I run through The Patio Farmer, please check out my website, thepatiofarmer.com. You can also follow me on social media. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and oh my gosh, most recently, TikTok. Wow. I know. I know. Here I am. Patio Farmer is on TikTok. It's very exciting. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a like or a rating or a review if you want. Maybe share a little comment about your favorite part of the episode. Share it with a friend. The more interactions I get with my little podcast online, the more I'm able to help people just like you in their food growing journeys. As always, thanks for being here, and I will see you again next week.